All right, so I'm going to start off by reading an email that I received recently from a guy named Rob. And I'm doing this because I know this is going to resonate with a lot of you. I'm sure a lot of you can identify with what Rob's saying here. So I'm going to skip ahead in the email, and he says, what I find happens often is I'll focus on a lesson, sometimes for weeks, and really get into it and mostly master it, but then I'll move on to a new lesson and find many months down the road that I've forgotten what I learned. And I know I can relate to that. I'm always trying to learn new stuff, and I forget at least half of what I learned. That's just normal. Now, actually, the truth is you don't really forget it. You can re-access it down the road. So we'll get to that in a minute. But then he goes on to say, if you have any suggestions on how to keep all of these lessons integrated, I would appreciate it. Do you have any suggestions on how to mix various lessons together to reinforce that vocabulary? I thought that was an awesome idea, and I've never done a lesson like this, and I may do more of these depending on how popular this is, but what I want to do is take Rob's idea of taking parts from lessons and pulling them together into a composition. That's what we really should be focusing on anyway. It's sort of like, why have I not done this lesson? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the last 4 lessons that I've done, and they're different styles. One was bluegrass, one was blues. They're sort of all over the place. But I'm going to take little pieces from those, not the entire solo, but just like a little piece, and we're going to pull them together and put them into a solo in this lesson. So this week's lesson is going to be in the key of E, and I'm going to show you how you can take these parts, pull them from other lessons, other styles, other tempos, all of that stuff, other keys even, and we're going to pull them all together and use them. Hopefully this will help a lot of you figure out kind of where Rob's at, like how do you remember this stuff and build on your vocabulary. So in this video, I'm going to go through all of that. If you'd like to download the tablature and the MP3 jam track of this composition that we're going to be working towards, and also I've got this in another key, so we're going to be learning this in the key of E, but I've also got it in the key of C with a jam track in the key of C, tablature for all of that as well. You can get these extra materials for this lesson by going to activemelody.com and doing a search for ML123. And why did I do it in the key of C? Well, we should always be thinking about this stuff and being able to do it in any key. So you're not limited to just a lick that only works in the key of E or A. You want to be able to play these ideas in any key. All right, so we're looking at the last 4 lessons that I've done. I'm not doing these in order, but we're going to start off with one I did a couple of weeks ago. And this was ML122. So if you're on activemelody.com and you want to search for that lesson, it's ML122. And the lesson title for that was using triads and harmonies to spice up your blues. And I played a little Delta blues thing in the key of A in that lesson. And actually, I want to go ahead and play part of that. And I want you to focus on this one part where we go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. I'll talk more about it. Here's what we're going to start off with. All right, so the part that we're going to be looking at was when I went from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. So that song was played in the key of A, and I went from my A chord to the D chord, and I did it like this. It's a very useful little idea, and it's just using triads, 2 triad shapes, to get from 1 chord to the other chord. Now we're going to be talking about how you take these ideas and put them in context for something else in this lesson. But if you want the specifics on exactly what I played when I did that little walk down, I've got links in the description to that specific section of that lesson. I've got that for each of these 4 lick ideas. So you can jump right to that part in the video if you want to do that. But here's the part I want you to learn from this, is this idea of taking this major triad and walking it down 2 frets, and then you've got these 2 minor triads. I want you to connect them to this chord shape. And I mentioned that in that previous lesson. But when you do that, so when I'm playing an A chord and I'm using the E shape here, it makes it easy for me to see this little walk down and how I can relate it back to this chord shape. So now we're going to take that and we're going to move it to the key of E, because that's what our jam track is going to be for this week. So there's my E chord using the E shape down in first position. I can't do that lick down here because I run out of fretboard. So I'm going to have to play my E chord up here using the E shape. And look at the top 3 strings. So I could just take that, walk it down 2 frets, and then here's my minor triad. There it is, down 2 frets, down to the 4 chord. So my E down to my A. And that's how we're going to do it in this key. And just keep in mind with these ideas, when we did the Delta Blues, it was like, it was kind of like that, different tempo. For this, we can take it a different approach. We can go. That would be nice for a country ballad or a slow song. You can pick the notes apart and start getting different ideas, but it's really pulled from that same concept. All right, so now I'm going to put on a jam track in the key of E, and I'm going to show you how you can start to use this idea over these different chords. Okay, we're going to start off with our E chord using the E shape up here. Watch this. Down to my A. So there's your first little idea. Now watch this. I will go from my B chord to my E using that same idea. So a light bulb just went off for somebody. Oh yeah, you can do this for each of the chords. Watch this. Here's my E down to my A. Down to there. Now here's my B. So you can see that I can take each of these chords, as long as I find the E chord shape, and I can pull this little triad idea. There's the A, here's the B. Back to my E. Okay, so the next idea was one that I got from a lesson 3 weeks ago, I think is when I did it. This was EP 619, and the title of that was Don't Overthink It, and it was about a minor pentatonic thing, kind of a J.J. Cale kind of vibe. But there was one little idea in that. Let me play a little piece of this, and then we'll talk about what's going on. All right, so that jam track was in F sharp minor, and there was a lot of cool minor pentatonic lick ideas in that. But there was one point in that where I switched and played a D major going to an A major. And I played this. And this is the idea. It's this simple idea of just taking a chord, like the A that we're going to go to in this example, and we're going to play an A sus4 and resolve to the A triad. Now that's that same triad shape we were just looking at, right? When we did our little, right? So you can take this triad now, and you can just come up one fret here on the 3rd string, and you get a sus4, and you can resolve that sus4 to the chord itself. That doesn't seem like much, but I want to show you with a jam track what you can start to do with just that idea. Okay, so now we're going to go back to this E shape, and watch this. I'm going to do the sus4. I'll do it for each of these chords. Here's the A. Here's the B chord. We'll do it here. And then back to my E. So I can take these two ideas now, the first idea and this one, and mix them together. So check this out. Here's the A. Here's the B. Watch this. Back to my E. So now you're starting to hear it, right? I'm taking these two ideas and I'm starting to create a solo out of those. Here's my B. Back to my E. All right, so now we're going to move on to a lesson that I did just last week, and that was a lesson called Jamming by Yourself, Bluegrass style. And there was one part in that where I was talking about Norman Blake and this Norman Blake lick, and I did that jam track in the key, or not jam track, I did that composition in the key of G, and I played this lick that goes, which is a Norman Blake lick. Doesn't sound as cool on electric guitar, but we can make it sound cool when we put it in context with this jam track. The whole idea of this was I showed you in that lesson how to take the G chord using the E shape, we're back to that E shape again, and play this which was like kind of like the top part of your 9 chord, like your G9, just these 2 notes, and then walk it down, and then walk it up back into strings 2 and 3 out of this triad. And so all of that in my head is just a lick around this chord shape. So if we want to do that over a different chord, which in this example, I'm going to show you how to play that over your B chord, because that's going to be our 5 chord. I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's take a look at the jam track now, and I'm going to show. I want to play this over each of the chords so you can just start to get the sound of this lick in your head and see how it relates to the chords. Okay, we're back to our E chord. Let's take a look at that Bluegrass lick, that Norman Blake lick. Check it out for each of these chords. Here it is for the B. There's the B chord using the E shape. And then back to my E chord. So let's mix that idea now with the other 2 ideas. We'll start to pull them together. Here's the sus chord. Now watch this. For the B, watch this, I'll do the Bluegrass. And then we'll go back to the sus chord thing. Now here we go. Now watch this. Here's the Bluegrass thing. To my E. All right, so hopefully some of this is starting to come together for you, and you're starting to see how the vocabulary idea works. It's pulling, it's not taking in whole solo, it's just taking like a little piece of a solo or a little phrase or a little idea and using that, making that part of your vocabulary. Okay, so this last lick idea comes from a lesson I did about a month ago, and this is one, and I think I called it something like playing the pentatonic scale with just one note, or using one note to find the pentatonic scale, something like that. I'll put it up on the screen. But anyway, the idea was you take your index finger, if you want to play the major pentatonic scale, you just find the note name for the key of the song. So in this case, we're doing this jam track in the key of E. I just find any E note on the fretboard. I can take this one, and then I play this one little pattern, which I talk about in that lesson. Now remember, there's a link to that in the description, so you can go into the detail of that specific lesson. But the idea was, you can take and play the major pentatonic scale. And just remember, I can do that for any E note on the fretboard. Just find it with my index finger. And I can get that major pentatonic scale idea. I can also take my ring finger and play that E note and then go a string above it and play the minor pentatonic scale. So if I want to go that, if I want to dial it in bluesy, I just kind of switch the finger. Anyway, that's all talked about in that lesson. I'm not going to recover that. But what I want to show you is how we can take the idea from that lesson of the major pentatonic scale, playing it sort of diagonally or horizontally across the fretboard, and use some of those lick ideas in this composition. So now we're going to take these 4 ideas. We're going to take the walk down from the 1 to the 4 chord. We're going to take the sus 4 chord, resolving to a major chord. We're going to take that Norman Blake lick, that little Bluegrass lick, harmonized third, and then we're going to take this major pentatonic scale starting from one note, and how you can take those pieces, pull them together, and play a little solo. All right, so now we're going to play the E major pentatonic scale using just one finger. We're going to start with our E note. This was talked about in lesson ML123, and so I showed you this pattern and how you can play the pentatonic scale all over the fretboard as long as you can find an E note, which is the key of the song. So I can find it down here, and I can just play the pentatonic scale, just staying in that same scale. Now I'm going to combine this pentatonic idea with the other ideas, so check this out. Now watch this, here's the sus. Here's the Bluegrass lick. And then the pentatonic scale. do it again. Isn't that cool? Now just remember, if you want more detail about any of these licks, more of a deep dive, you can get that by clicking on the links in the description and go right to those sections of those lessons. All right, so that's what we have for this week's lesson. Leave a comment. Let me know, did this resonate with you? Thank you, Rob, for sending that awesome email. And by the way, I can do more lessons like this, pulling ideas from past lessons. I could definitely repurpose that. It's easy for me. It made this week a lot easier just taking stuff I've already done. So if you like that idea, leave a comment below and let me know, because I'll definitely do that. And if you have any questions on anything, you can leave that as well. All right, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, click the alert bell. I know this stuff gets said all the time, but I really mean it, because I put out lessons like this every week, and I've been doing it for many years. And also give me a thumbs up. Okay, I'll see you next week for something new.